That was longer. That's like a whole other episode. Are you just going to post the whole thing?
No, I'll probably cut it down to like 2 minutes. So, well, we made it. Episode 11, the big finale of our first season of Art Design Music. And I know you've been on the edge of your seat wondering how it would all end. Would Stefano wake up from his coma and find out that Hulk Hogan and Dog the Bounty Hunter were actually the same person? Will it be revealed that behind the mask this whole time was actually just a league of lizards hell-bent on taking over the planet? Boring! So much to be revealed in this larger-than-life episode's exploration of all things art and design and how they pertain to our favorite pieces of music. First off, apologies on this episode being a little late. We did such a great job all season, keeping to a solid release schedule, but there was a ton to fit into today's episode, and getting it all done in a week, while also battling a new wave of the pandemic, looming holiday madness, and paid client work. This one just missed the launch date, but we're here now, so let's celebrate the wins rather than those delays. Don't forget that we have posted photos and images of as many of the things discussed on today's episode as possible over on our website at artdesignmusic.com. Click on episodes and find number 11, which we've titled Listener Q&A, to follow along. I've added links to artists and bands we discuss, music videos, art, posters, and so much more. As always, I want to thank you so much for checking out this podcast. Whether this is your first episode or you've been with us from the start, thank you, thank you, thank you. We received a ton of messages and emails as episodes rolled out. Roberta Landreth is an incredible designer from Winnipeg, and she wrote, "I'm seriously loving these so much. You are such a great interviewer, and each of these is just so satisfying. Thanks for making such a thing." That message made me feel great. Interviewing people isn't something I've ever done before, and the process of figuring it out will continue to be a massive learning curve. Becky Peckham, another incredible graphic designer and very popular YouTuber, said, "Aaron Draplin is fucking hilarious. Love it so far." Yes, he is, Becky. Everything about Aaron Draplin is the best. He's got talent pouring out of every socket. And I'm honored he was a guest on the show. And I'm honored that you, Becky, had the time to give it a listen, because I know you are an incredibly, incredibly busy person. Thank you so much. Michaela Benoit, another great graphic designer, wrote, "Your show notes are awesome. Makes it possible to enjoy even when you aren't familiar with the guest work." And she wrote this before her photo with Aaron Draplin appeared in the episode 10 show notes. "Hope you're cool with having your photo included, Michaela. Thanks so much for your note." Kayla Johnson and musician Chris Myers are two people from my hometown whom I love. Chris said, "Loving the show. A side of the industry I know nothing about and have been loving learning more about." And then Kayla said, "Even as a non-graphic designer, I love learning about the process and listening to people talk about their passion." This has been an exciting aspect of the show for me as host. While it's primarily made for other people that work in the music biz, either as musicians or industry people behind the scenes, I've been loving that so many other people are digging into the episodes and coming along for our nerdy journey of discovery. The more the merrier. Please tell your friends, subscribe, share it on Facebook, whatever it is, let folks know. This email came in from a killer graphic designer living in Toronto. "Hey Jed, loving the podcast. Design for music is one of my favorite arenas to work in, so it is amazing to hear all of these brilliant artists share stories about their work. They are all great, but the Draplin one has been my favorite. He is such a great guy. I saw him years ago at Design Thinkers in Toronto, around the time I was thinking about leaving my in-house job. Shortly after Design Thinkers, I emailed Aaron to tell him he had inspired me to break out on my own. He wrote me back immediately saying, 'Slay it, man, slay it, man, slay it, man.' It was a great boost when I needed it. Anyway, really digging the show. Thanks for the entertainment and inspiration to help get me through those long days." That's from Chris Tompkins of Chris Tompkins Design in Toronto. Chris, this was awesome. It's impossible not to feed off Aaron's energy, and I'm just so happy that he puts his good vibes out into the world at every opportunity. Check out Chris's work at christompkins.com. Sean Amos from Fredericton wrote, "Hey Judd, I hope things are well. I'm loving the podcast. I wanted to drop a little recommendation. One of my high school pals, Peter Diamond, has made quite a career for himself in the world of illustration. He's now based in Vienna, Austria, but grew up in Fredericton and spent probably a decade in the Halifax art and music scenes. He studied at Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. Maybe you guys have crossed paths. peterdiamond.ca is his website. Anyway, Pete is an amazing guy. He got his start designing DIY show posters. He ran a small Fredericton punk zine, and also he played in an incredible high school band called O, just the letter O. They were great, way ahead of the curve for a bunch of 16-year-olds. A totally crazy, mostly instrumental, trashy art post-punk outfit. A lot of it reminds me of Carrie and Contrived, actually. Side note, we're going to talk about them later in this episode. Plus, they did a great cover of Motor Breath by Metallica. Anyway, Peter has been featured in Juxtapose magazine and has done some major commission pieces around the globe. He has strong ties to music. Just thought he could be a great fit for your new podcast. Take care. So awesome hearing from you, Sean. If we time warp back nearly 20 years, the bands Sean and I played in used to tour the eastern half of Canada together. Those were super fun times, and I really loved getting to know Sean, Zach, Pierre, and Greg, all the members of Dionysus back in the day. I've actually been following Peter Diamond for years and somehow had no idea he was from Atlantic Canada. If he lived in Halifax around the same time I did, there's probably a good chance we even met, and I feel bad if that's the case and I don't remember. But anyway, I'm going to add Peter to my list of go-to artists to try and chase after and see if we can't get him on this podcast for a future episode. This one comes to us from Durrell Godfrey of East Hamptons, New York State. She says, "I was so pleased to hear my late husband's name, John Berg, on your episode with Gerard Huerta. He was the VP of Art and Packaging at CBS Records in the early 70s. They say that working there at that time was like going to the Harvard of graphic design. Bold statement, but probably true. He came up with that concept of the Chicago logo being the same size and same position, but rendered in odd materials. The cover you showed on your show notes of the office building was done after John's tenure at CBS. And you can notice that the logo is no longer in the same central position. John considered that kind of thing to be, quote, a design pollution. Awesome. I love that. So, if you ever do something on the Chicago logos, be aware that the John Berg era ones were always dead center. That's the map, the chocolate bar, the banknote engraving, and of course, the thumbprint you spoke about with Gerard. There's a Facebook page called John Berg for the Record, which I began after he died in 2015. So sorry for your loss there, Darrell. Anyway, thanks for the podcast. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and having the show notes page to scroll through made it even better. Great that you have Paula coming up. Looking forward to that one. Bravo, Durrell Godfrey of East Hamptons, New York. Thanks so much for writing in, Durrell. I wasn't aware of John Berg prior to receiving this email, but since have gone down quite the exciting Google rabbit hole learning about his incredible career. You can find that link to the Facebook page she started over on our show notes at artdesignmusic.com. I'm very fortunate to have an amazing crew of buddies. So many of them have been supportive, giving the podcast a listen when design and music might not have anything to do with their chosen careers at all. For instance, my buddy Rebecca Gladney, hi Rebecca, is a registered massage therapist, sports therapist, and recently children's book author. She's always wonderfully upbeat and a great person to have around. She had some questions. She wrote, in episode 2 with Chad Van Galen, you guys talk about rotoscope animation. What is rotoscope and what's involved in the process of creating it? I tried Googling, but don't really have a clear idea of what it is. All right, I'm going to try my best to describe rotoscoping. Essentially, an action is filmed using standard cameras, like a person walking, conversation between two people, anything really. Basically, you just make some film. Then the film is given to a rotoscope animator who will trace or draw over every frame of the film, making a drawn or painted animation that follows the filmed footage. Rotoscoping is used a lot to make realistic looking animation. It's used for an effect sparingly sometimes, and in other instances, entire movies or films are made with rotoscoping. In 2017, the groundbreaking film Loving Vincent was blowing audiences' mind as it was entirely created by painting rotoscoped frames to make an animated movie entirely out of paintings. This entire movie was filmed first using real actors and settings. Then more than 65,000 hand-painted frames were created in the brush style of Vincent van Gogh to give the impression that Vincent had painted the film himself. I've posted this trailer for Loving Vincent in the show notes if you want to check it out, along with a couple other examples of rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is a ton of work, and it's like creating a film twice. Once by shooting it with real people and scenes, and then the second round is tracing and drawing over those frames to create an animated rotoscoped version. It's actually so much work. Some people really, really love rotoscoping, but I usually find the realistic look of it to be a little strange. Thankfully, the way Chad Van Galen draws is so unique to his own visual voice that his work never comes off as anything other than brilliant. Anyway, I hope that explains it a little bit better for you, Rebecca. Probably not. I'm also not great at explaining these things, but check out the show notes if you get a chance. It's much easier to understand with those visual references. Rebecca also noted that in episode 3 with Jay Ryan, I make reference to a poster that I created a while back that I kind of hold as like the best piece I've ever made, and I haven't been able to kind of create anything else that kind of hits that mark. But I don't say what the poster is. She wanted to know which poster I was talking about and what makes me feel it's my best work. I feel like I need to explain that some of the interviews for this podcast were recorded in a different order than the episodes came out. For instance, I had interviewed Michelle Holme only a few days before Jay Ryan, and I remembered while talking to Jay that I had already told the story of my Neil Young poster during my conversation with Michelle. I didn't want to bore you all with repeated stories, although I'm sure sooner or later that's going to happen and I probably won't even catch it. So I stopped myself from going any further into the mention of my favorite poster piece while talking to Jay, which, in my opinion, my best poster is that Neil Young one that I was talking about with Michelle. It's created for his After the Gold Rush album a few years ago when he was winning an award. I don't know why or how, but everything just seemed to click when I was making that one. I love the composition, the colors turned out great, the weird plants growing out of Neil's shoulder, I don't know. I just feel that I lucked out on this one and haven't been able to top it, but one of these days, my God, I hope I will. I'm going to keep on pushing anyway. We'll see. That's one of the fun things about art, though. While that poster is one of my favorites of my own work, I'm sure there are lots of people who see it and don't think anything of it at all, and that's totally cool. Anyway, that Neil Young poster is also in the show notes for anyone curious. Thanks so much for writing, Rebecca. You could have asked this stuff when we ran into each other around town, but I love that you sent in an email to artdesignmusicpodcast@gmail.com. What a rock star you are. Rebecca also noted that I've got to make sure to remove those notification dings in season 2, which I wish I could, but since my interviews are being done remotely during these pandemic times, I haven't been able to control what settings my guests have on their computers. So every now and then, an email notification bing comes flying through those speakers. I like to picture listeners scrambling for their phones, trying to figure out if that was their phone or not. Hopefully someday we'll be able to figure out how to get past those, but for now, every now and then there might be a bing. Trust me, it's not coming from my computer. Claire Rigby from London, UK wrote, "Hi Judd, great show. I've been loving listening to Art Design Music and I'm so happy there's finally a podcast that talks to the folks that work behind the scenes to make all our favorite musicians look so damn good." I added the word damn. You mentioned that many of your guests are your art and design heroes. Were any of them intimidating to talk to? Which guests were you the most nervous to interview, and which did you feel the most relaxed? This is a fun question, Claire. Thank you. Yeah, I am pretty much losing it during almost all of these conversations. As I say at the beginning of episode 1, I'm not a broadcaster and not a reporter. So playing this role of show host is very, very out of my normal comfort zone. With pretty much every guest, we'd have a few minutes to chat before hitting the record button. This helped both of us relax and gave us a chance to get to know each other a tiny bit before we dove in. But I didn't always get to have this extra few minutes at the beginning. Paula Scheer, for instance, is super busy. We were on a very tight timeline for her interview, so I hit the record button right away. There was no time for small talk or getting to know each other. She's also such a massive icon in our industry that I was freaking out the entire chat. I don't think I fully relaxed for 1 second of that entire conversation because she is just such a huge influence and inspiration to me that I don't know. I was just freaking out. It happens. Aaron Draplin and I chatted for nearly 40 minutes before even hitting record. What started out as saying hello quickly jumped into catching up and then some stories. At one point, he was like, "Are we even recording yet? You're missing out on all this gold." And I hit the button right away because he was right. I hadn't hit the record button yet. So we covered a lot of fun stuff in those first 40 minutes that isn't in the podcast. And I guess it'll just be little memories for myself. I was very super relaxed talking to Aaron, which it made for a nice afternoon. We talked for that 40 minutes beforehand, hit record, talked for the length of the podcast. And then we ended up talking for another half an hour afterwards. It was just a nice chat. He's so gracious with his time, and we had a blast. Now, all season, I was pitching the idea of having listeners write in with questions for our guests so that we could get a couple of them to come back on and get you some answers. Well, all I can say is that I must have done an incredible job asking questions. I must have covered everything you could have ever wanted to know, as I didn't get even one person writing in with a specific question for a guest. Lots and lots of emails and lots of comments from folks, even questions for me, but none directed directly at a guest, which is not a problem at all. I totally get it. Some folks are shy. Some folks just don't know what to ask. And some folks are just not interested. All cool. No one is being forced to participate. We'll try again next season. That said, I did ask episode 6 guest, graphic designer extraordinaire Michelle Holme, to come back on to discuss an incredibly cool and unique project she has been a part of. Once again, if you're handy to a computer or tablet right now, and you want to pop over to our website at artdesignmusic.com and check out Michelle's show notes where we post photos of all the cool things she's about to discuss. Anyway, let's go say hi to Michelle. Thanks for coming back on for this little follow-up.
No worries.
Your episode's actually been one of the more popular ones.
Shut up.
I received a pile of comments from different people. Yeah, it's fun. It's exciting. And so I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago about, I just kind of followed up to see if you happen to have any of the original artwork from the Wrecking Ball finger-painted text that you had done for that popular Bruce Springsteen record. You graciously sent along a couple images that you had, which was great. And then you also included a few extras things to just kind of, for me, if I wanted to consider popping into the show notes. And a couple of the images that were there were these beautiful guitars. I didn't recognize them right away, but as soon as I started looking a bit further, I was like, wait a second, these are Bruce Springsteen's guitars.
So I think it was during Magic, he asked to come by. I think it was in Asbury at the convention hall. He was like rehearsing for something, and he wanted to put some Loteria cards and like little milagros on one of his guitars and wanted some help. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we just kind of had an acoustic guitar, and he had like a bunch of cards and milagros and a couple other little medals, and we just kind of arranged them. And he's like, okay, cool. Like that looks good. I'm like, great. So I took a picture and then I took it home, and I was like, okay, this is no pressure. I'm going to completely mess this up. But I just kind of arranged them and stuck them on. And then he liked that. And he was thinking about doing more custom guitars. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll see if I can find someone who could do that for you. And I was like looking around, and he, eventually he was like, oh, why don't you try? I'm like, I don't know if, what? So then I just ended up doing a couple of guitars. But like the first couple of them were all in like more of a retablo kind of thing. It's like a little art piece from Mexico. So I had my friend, his name is Ian Cutler. He's from Mexico, and he could help me with understanding some of the history behind it and what to do with it. And he and I put together 2 guitars. And he's also fluent in Spanish, so I didn't want to mess up any of the words on it. So we did those, and then I kind of continued on with a lot of, I guess, like more Catholic iconography. And then I did a couple that have the hearts and swords, and he really seemed to like those. So those were fun because I got to do them in 3 different flavors. But I just kept painting them, and it's very strange and it's very daunting. It's really hard for me to understand how I fell into it, but I mean, it's just I've been lucky that he's liked the guitars, and like every time I sent him off one, I was like, oh my god, is it gonna play? Is it gonna sound okay? Did I mess it up somehow? And then, but I just kind of learned on the fly, and I've done, there was a pause because of, I didn't have any space in like Hell's Kitchen apartment, and it's very hard to do it with children around, and like, it involves like chemicals and razor blades and like, things that don't go well with small children. But then I've done like, I started doing, I'm doing one right now for someone else, and I have another one on the wing. So like, I have more space now, so I can leave it out, and it's easier for me to work on because it's like different, because I can't hit undo, and just really frustrating. So I just kind of like noodle on it a little bit, and then I go away for like a day or 2 and noodle some more. So it's kind of I need space to have it out for a bit. And but yeah, I don't really understand how it happened. And then somehow some of them got into like a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then I went to visit it, and it blew my mind, and I was like, oh my god, this is really strange. I never really thought that I would have like something I painted in a museum. So it's all very like weird, and even like I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, this is all very strange. That's how that happened.
Like, so you met with him in person?
For the Milagro guitar, yeah.
So you're saying you get called essentially to come and meet with him. He lays a guitar in front of you and says, I want to put artwork on this. Can you do that for me?
Yeah. Well, the Milagro one and the Loteria one, we did it together. Like we just were kind of like putting the pieces on and kind of arranging them to look nice, to look, cool. And then, but also being mindful, these are metal pieces. And I'm like, we're trying to make sure positioning for his hands, and just not to like, to be mindful of where his hands would be, so it wouldn't it'd be functional, so it was just kind of like a very trippy experience, just just arranging these metal pieces. And then I just took a picture for the placement, and then went off and did them, and went through
and he actually uses these guitars. Like, these guitars are used in his live shows.
It's so weird. It's
it's
very
amazing.
Weird, and and I do whenever like I see one of them and he's playing with them, I do get I'm like, oh, he still likes them.
Yeah. And how many have you done?
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I would say close to 10.
Wow. So you've customized 10 guitars for Bruce Springsteen. That's pretty crazy. And he uses them in his shows. Yeah, I think this is amazing. And I've looked at the photos. Obviously, I haven't seen them in person, but I mean, these are beautiful, like vintage acoustic guitars that, I mean, I can only imagine the pressure when you're handed something.
Oh God, I know.
It's a beautiful instrument for anyone to own, let alone the fact that it's Bruce Springsteen's personal guitar and you're getting to create artwork on it. It's kind of really, really exciting and very unique and interesting thing that, again, falls perfectly into your portfolio of work of like, take graphic design, take art, and totally flip it on its head and basically start over and figure out a new way to do it. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that, of course, you ended up creating a bunch of custom guitars for Bruce Springsteen that he uses everywhere.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very daunting. And every time I put sandpaper on it, it's just very daunting.
And so these were designed before, most of them were made before his Springsteen on Broadway series. Like, they weren't made for that, but he ended up using them during that series, right?
I know. And it was very unexpected. I was fortunate enough to go to some of the rehearsals and the lead up shows, before it opened or whatever. He brought out one of the guitars, I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's like on Broadway. And then he brought in another color. I was like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. Like there were like a 3 or 4 in the stage show. And every time I saw the ship performance, I still get like, I'm like, oh my God, I get all giggly and weird, whatever.
Yeah, it's so cool. And then you ended up also doing the branding for the Springsteen on Broadway series, as like even the marketing,
Yeah.
all the ads and billboards and everything. You ended up designing all that as well, right?
Yeah. All the signage. And it was very nice that I got a chance to do that. What was weird is the first go around, it was right down the street for me. Like,
yeah.
I was like in Hell's Kitchen, so I could walk to the theater very easily. So it helped with, kind of developing the signage and like, walking around the space and seeing everything. But it was kind of a trip to be like, go over to get some approvals. I'm like, okay, I'll be there in like, 10 minutes. Like I'm like walking over. It was very convenient at the time.
It's so cool that you're in a space too, where you've created this work that's being used in another piece of work that you've also worked on. The fact that you create the guitars, then they get used in the show that you also create the branding for, and it's down the street, so you can go and check it out. You get to go to the rehearsals, then you can see the final show. And then I'm assuming that you also worked on then the vinyl release and the CD releases.
Oh yeah, that's true.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
basically, this entire production you had your hands in. My next door neighbor flew from here to New York, stayed in hotels, brought his mom and dad, and went to one of those shows, right? Like a huge deal.
Nice.
Like that vinyl box set is in the house directly next door to here. Anyway, I find it all so amazing, and it's kind of cool that I've seen those guitars, a couple of them. I'd seen images of Bruce playing these guitars, and obviously they look cool. They got art on them. It's different than a normal guitar you would buy in a store. But I never made the association that you created the artwork that was on those. And it's just such an interesting, cool thing. And I'm thankful that you included a couple of those shots with the images that you sent over for the show notes, because it blew my mind, set me off on a whole other track.
Oh, no worries.
I hope things are going great. I saw on your Instagram, I know it's been a couple months, but I saw that your son went out as the Mandalorian for Halloween.
It was it was a lot of family fun, and like both of them are now vaxxed up now, so hopefully it's getting better.
Amazing. And thank you again so much for having another chat. These guitars and this whole Springsteen on Broadway and the rest of it is such another cool thing that we didn't get to chat about in our first episode, but I'm so glad that we got to have a follow-up.
No worries. I'm glad it's I have something interesting to say.
I'm sure I'll be chasing after you time and time again. The work keeps on coming out, and it's always so cool. So thank you so much.
No worries. Lovely chat.
So, all you designers and illustrators out there, how would you react if Bruce Springsteen called you into a one-on-one meeting and then passed you some vintage acoustic guitars and asked you to make art on them? Oh, the idea of that still totally freaks me out. Is that the kind of challenge you'd look forward to, or would something like that freak you the F out? This is a crazy opportunity Michelle had, and I'm so glad she was willing to take a few minutes to tell us the story. Many of you commented on her episode, and the most common comment seemed to be absolute astonishment that her first album cover project ever was for Springsteen. She has designed every record he has put out in the last 20 years, and that trust he has in her judgment when it comes to art and design decisions has never been more apparent than him passing over his personal collection of guitars and asking her to basically use them as canvases to make art. Oh man, it is the coolest, but also the scariest. If you're not following Michelle Holme on Instagram yet, then what are you waiting for? Find her at michelle.holme. Holme is spelled Holme. For a bit of fun between episodes, I asked some questions over on our Instagram, and the results were too good. For instance, when I asked if you have ever bought a tour poster for a show you weren't at, a ton of you said you have, with only a very, very small portion of responses saying no. Jacob Cherwick said, I have two big screen printed posters, a Phoebe Bridgers poster and a Foo Fighters poster from the Save Our Stages festival that happened in 2020. It was put on by the National Independent Venue Association to raise money during lockdown. They live streamed a couple dozen concerts from empty venues and hired different artists to design posters for each show. So technically, nobody was at those shows, but I did tune in live. Thanks for that, Jacob. I hadn't heard of this live streamed festival, and it seemed like the coolest idea. I popped over to saveourstages.com and checked out the posters Jacob mentioned, and I noticed that the site has a huge sale on where these posters are being sold at a drastic discount. So if anyone is looking for a cool, limited edition screen print from your favorite band at a bargain basement price, and all the money going to a good cause, go check that out, saveourstages.com. Thanks, Jacob. Jeffrey Lush said he bought the poster from the final Tragically Hip tour, and he also has a fictional tour poster from the film A Star is Born. A bunch of you said you bought posters that I designed even though you weren't at those shows. That's exciting. Thank you. How cool. Great little pop to my ego. Thank you very much. How awesome are you? Thank you. Dave, who didn't leave a last name, said he has a friend that designs at Zoka Studio in Toronto who do amazing work for Wilco, Jason Isbell, and Chris Stapleton, among others. So he likes to support his friend and has bought a bunch of these posters. Zoka are amazing. So excited to hear there are Zoka fans like myself on here checking out the show. And my friend Alex McGaskill said he has bought Rob Jones's incredible White Stripes show posters, even though Alex wasn't at any of those shows. Alex himself is an incredible illustrator and screen print poster artist, so I love hearing that even killer artists are collecting work by other killer artists. I have a Godspeed You Black Emperor screen print poster from 2001 for a tour I didn't attend. Even though I have seen that band play a half dozen times, but they never seem to have posters on sale for the shows that I was at. Another Instagram question I posed for a laugh was, what bucket list band do you wish you could see, but are pretty sure you never will? Most people sent in names of massive bands, superstars like Tool, Eminem, Mogwai, Nine Inch Nails, Joni Mitchell, Daft Punk, that definitely top of my list, Springsteen, Tom Waits, absolute number one top of my list, St. Vincent, Alanis Morissette, Radiohead, Postal Service, Coldplay, Kiss, and Black Sabbath. Some said they'd want to see the original lineup Guns N' Roses, or Sigur Rós, or the Beatles. Yeah, that's never going to happen. While others were into more obscure bucket list groups like Lamb Chop, Caius, Elbow, OK Go, The Sleeping, Idols, or Big Brother and the Holding Company. Some of these groups I've never heard of, but I'm definitely going to check them out just because if they are your bucket list band, I'm sure they must be just friggin' awesome. I love these types of questions as it gives me a bit of an indication of who you're all fans of. It helps me decide which album cover designers or genres I should maybe consider for future episodes. And speaking of future guests, some of you sent in suggestions of people you'd love me to chat with. Alex McGaskill, who I mentioned a moment ago, that great illustrator and printmaker, suggested Toronto's Double Knot crew. I've been a fan of their work for years, and I think every craft brewery looks at what they've done with Bellwoods Brewery Co. as the template for fine beer design. Broadcaster and massive music fan Melissa Tobin suggested Pusshead, the incredible American artist best known for his 80s and 90s Metallica and Misfits t-shirts and album art. Pusshead's real name is Brian Schroeder, and I would love to talk to him about his art and career. I have reached out on his Facebook and website, but with no response. I'm going to keep on trying. Thanks for that suggestion, Melissa. He is absolutely on my radar. I would be so honored to get him on here. And graphic designer Ben Nelson suggested British designer and art director Peter Saville, saying, "He is my personal hero in art shows in life. He seems very elusive, but you have found some giants already." Thanks, Ben. That would be huge if it were possible. Peter is the co-founder of Factory Records and is responsible for many iconic album covers for groups like New Order, Joy Division, Pulp, Suede, Peter Gabriel, and Roxy Music. I have reached out to Peter for this podcast and definitely hope to get him on here at some point. Thanks for the killer suggestion. A couple people had told me they were enjoying the podcast, but life was so busy that they had already fallen behind on episodes and needed an afternoon to catch up. That made me wonder if posting new shows weekly was too much. So I posted the question on our Instagram stories, would you rather new episodes come out weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly? And almost every single response said they preferred weekly. So we're going to stick with that when season 2 launches. And probably the question I posed that got the biggest response was, what album cover do you remember loving as a kid? So many great responses. This was really fun. Simon Bo Manzer said, Edge of Insanity by Tony McAlpine. I had never heard of this album, so I Googled it, and I can see why it's one that would shake a young person's mind. Gavin Davidson sent a couple images, they're over in the show notes, of course, of a Australian AC/DC cover, and then Strangers in the Night. Gavin mentioned that his brother had bought that AC/DC record in Glasgow, and then Gavin stole all his records when he moved out. Then remarked that Strangers in the Night is the best classic rock album ever, period. Yeah, it's pretty damn good. I like it a lot as well. Bled Salika is an artist manager at Arts and Crafts, a really cool record label and management company in Toronto, and co-hosts a podcast about the Criterion collection of films called Surprisingly Criterion. He said Lowe's The Great Destroyer was the album cover he loved most as a kid. Lowe have been one of my favorite bands for the last 2 decades, so this was exciting for me to hear their name. Their album Trust is a big record for me. I go back to it super often, and later in this podcast, we're actually going to talk a bit more about Lowe. And a little local love now. Mark Manning from the Newfoundland band Rum Ragged mentioned Falling Down Laughing by The Catch. It's another record that I'd never heard of. I wasn't able to find an image online anywhere, so we'll have to take your word for it, Mark. I bet this cover is awesome. Maybe I'll find it somewhere. Jordan Howard grew up loving The Freewheeling by Bob Dylan and said it's such an iconic photo and cover. Agreed, Jordan. Not one I paid much attention to as a kid, but definitely a great cover. Then Erin McGuire said U2's Joshua Tree was the reason she became a designer and a photographer, which is amazing. I love that a record cover would inspire a life journey and career. Joshua Tree was actually mentioned over and over, by far the most mentioned record in the list. Corey Eisner mentioned Matt Mays and El Torpedo, which was also very fun to hear, as that's a record that I worked on. I designed that cover with Matt and his dad. His dad did the illustration. I had Matt handwrite all the lettering for his name, but also all the credits inside. And it's super cool to see any record that I had the chance to work on make this list. Here's a fun one. My old buddy John Hines, who lives in Ottawa, mentioned Metallica's Kill 'Em All and said he loved the devotion metal bands have to always going with custom fonts for their band names. Kill 'Em All was definitely a favorite of mine when I was a teen too. I think partially because it always amazed me that it was ever made in the first place. For those not familiar with that album cover, it depicts an outstretched hand moving away from a hammer placed at the edge of a pool of blood, meant to depict the moment right after a horrific act has taken place. This was the band's debut record, and I remember always being blown away that they were able to get record labels and distributors to let them put out such a brash cover. Of course, years later, I discovered there's a great story. The band members originally wanted an even more brash cover. The record was going to be called Metal Up Your Ass and featured a hand holding a machete coming up out of a toilet. Distributors refused to carry the album if it had that cover, which would mean the album would not be available in record stores anywhere. The band, obviously frustrated that they were being pushed to not use the cover they wanted, came up with Kill 'Em All and the Bloody Hammer. I'm assuming distributors probably weren't in love with this image either, but realizing it was somehow the lesser of two evils, allowed this design to pass, and the rest is history. The record came out in July 1983, and 2 years later, after the release of the band's second album, Ride the Lightning, which featured an electric chair straight out of a prison horror movie, Metallica released the original Metal Up Your Ass Toilet album cover as a t-shirt. And that t-shirt has been in constant circulation ever since as a band merch item, more than 35 years and counting. I can only imagine that they've sold a ton of these t-shirts over the years and feel very vindicated every time a fan is wearing one. John, my buddy, I miss you. I hope Ottawa is treating you and the family very well. I love that you grew up staring into Kill 'Em All and either being enamored by it or scared of it, whichever it was, because I know I felt both. And thank you so much for checking out the podcast and for writing in. Hope to see you real soon, buddy. Marcel Levandier said he has always been a fan of albums designed by Raymond Pettibon. And I'm right there with you. One of my favorite covers by any band ever is Sonic Youth's Goo, which was drawn by Raymond. I actually reached out to him about coming on the show. He showed a glimmer of interest, and I'm hoping it might just happen one of these days. So many great album covers were mentioned. I can't dig into them all here as the submissions, honestly, they rolled into the hundreds, which is amazing. I never thought I'd get that kind of response. Thank you all so much. It looks like folks spent a lot of their youth staring into records by Pearl Jam, Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, Sex Pistols, Led Zeppelin, Beck, Wonderful Grand Band, Wallflowers, Green Day, Bjork, White Stripes, Radiohead, Sonic Youth, Smashing Pumpkins, the Mars Volta, Bad Religion, Crash Test Dummies, Blind Guardian, another group I never heard of, but I looked up and they have some really wild up record covers. Live, Joy Division, Funkadelic, Meatloaf, Tool, Arab Strap, Rancid, Tom Waits, UFO, At the Drive-In, Santana, Queen, Rolling Stones, Lauryn Hill, Elton John, Crowded House, Hendrix, Weezer, Pink Floyd, Toad the Wet Sprocket, and Alanis Morissette. You get the idea. Folks grew up looking into record covers. It's been a big part of all of our lives. Thank you very much for playing along. Again, with Joshua Tree was the one that was mentioned the most. Meatloaf's Bad Outta Hell was also mentioned a ton. And basically every Iron Maiden record got an honorable mention by, dozens of people. Everyone seems to love that zombie-like mascot Eddie that the band has. And Radiohead's OK Computer was also mentioned dozens of times. Posting questions like these on social media turned out to be a ton of fun. And it's something that I'll definitely continue with from time to time. Thank you all for playing along. Every submission was added to our draw for the 10 episode prizes, which I'll be announcing a little later on in this episode. Ben Nelson, who I mentioned earlier had suggested Peter Seville as a potential show guest, also wrote a nice note after our first 3 or 4 episodes came out. He said, "I am currently listening to your new podcast for people like us. I love it." Well, I don't know if he said, "I love it" the way that I just said, "I love it," but that's the way that I read it. So, I love it. Not since the days of gigposters.com have I felt reconnected to the community I have and still belong to. Music design nerds forever. Great show. Ben and I have never met face to face, but I'm a big fan of his art and design. He lives in Kingston, Ontario, and creates incredible work for his clients, so getting the nod from him meant a ton to me. I love that this is the 3rd time that gigposters.com came up on this show. Drew Millward and Jay Ryan both discussed that formative website community on their episodes. Drew went as far as to say that he's not sure he'd be doing what he does at all had it not been for gigposters.com. And that is a perfect segue to my next guest. I want to introduce you to Vish Khanna if you don't know him already. He's the host of popular music and culture podcast Creative Control. I've been a fan of this show for years and was very excited when he asked me to come on an episode to chat about this podcast, Art Design Music. Then, when I realized his connection to music posters, specifically Jay Ryan music posters, that warranted my need to get him on here for a chat. Don't forget to follow along with photos and images over on artdesignmusic.com. Okay, let's go meet Vish. Okay, first things first, isn't today your birthday?
Today is my birthday. And
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you.
I can't believe you wanted to have a chat on your birthday.
So what's happening right now as we're speaking is it's the kids' bedtime, but my wife's in a yoga class, a virtual yoga class, and the kids just want to do their own thing. So I was like, I'm alone on my birthday. Might as well talk to Judd.
I love this. Well, thank you so much. I'm very, very excited, and happy birthday again, my friend.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet of you. Thank you.
We had a chat earlier, a few days ago, for your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you did with me right out of the gate was ask me to explain what the hell my podcast was about. So I'm going to turn the tables.
Oh,
And why don't you explain for my listeners what your podcast, Creative Control, is about?
it is ostensibly a one-on-one interview show that's been going since 2013. As we're speaking, it's hovering around 660 episodes or so. Not quite there as I'm speaking. Today was episode 656, featuring Steve Albini.
Wow.
So it's just, it's a lot of episodes. So yeah, it's just a weekly, sometimes mostly once a week if I can help it. It's once a week, and if things get away from me, then it's twice a week. It's basically a conversation podcast with comedians, musicians, authors, a couple of graphic designers, a few graphic designers. There is also like a live talk show version that I do with the Long Winter Festival in Toronto, which has taken the shape of an actual conventional late night talk show or like a panel discussion. So yeah, that's, I think in a nutshell, that's what Creative Control is. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great. And Creative Control was, as I mentioned to you on your show, a huge influence on me even wanting to get my own podcast going. And I remember as soon as I kind of had the idea, you were essentially the first person I spoke to because I knew I needed some advice because I had no idea where to even start. So I figured you'd have some great tips and pointers, which you did. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, you're welcome, Judd. That's the hope with my work, is that it inspires other people to think, good Lord, if that guy can do it, I can too. That's my hope. That's what I'm making a little self-deprecating joke, but I do hope it inspires other kids like you were, like I was, interested, in my case, interested in media and communications as a kid, not knowing how the hell do these people get these jobs? How do they get to do this? And then you figure it out. I'm happy to hear that, and I'm happy you have this great show. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. While you were researching me and my show to talk on your show, you were listening to a few of the episodes. So thank you very much for taking the time to do that, because I know it takes a while. You kept messaging me while you were listening to Jay Ryan's episode, which is all very timely because right now you just said today's launch on your show was the Steve Albini episode. And of course, Jay Ryan and Steve Albini are both Chicago guys. They're both buddies. And it's kind of funny that basically Steve Albini's band is who we're going to talk about right now. In that episode, which was episode 3 of mine, I asked Jay what his favorite poster is he's ever made. He's designed over 1,000 posters to date. And I asked him what kind of his favorite one is. Now, he did say it would be difficult to pick a favorite, but then he very quickly jumped right in and started talking about a 1998 poster for a Fugazi and Shellac concert, which is oddly enough was my favorite poster he's ever made as well. I was like kind of hoping we would get to talk about this specific one, as it was always my favorite poster he's ever made. I've been searching for about 10 years or more now, constantly looking at eBay and looking on the web, trying to find one because they've been sold out forever. And then you're writing me and going, holy crap, I've got that poster. I've got the one you're talking about. And you sent me a photo of it and I was just blown away.
Yeah.
So you said you bought that poster at that show. Tell me the story.
Yeah. So let me just turn around for a second. Friday, May 8th, 1998, the bill in Chicago was Fugazi and Shellac and Blonde Redhead. Basically, what had occurred was I was at the University of Guelph, and I was a go-getter. I like to do things. And on a whim, I says to my friend Aaron Riches and his friend Phil Hunter, I heard that Fugazi and Shellac are playing in Chicago. Wouldn't it be fun if we all went? And Aaron's like, 100%, we got to go. Aaron is similarly spirited, wants to do things. So I say, all right, I'll figure out how to get tickets. And what it was I bought enough tickets that myself, Steve Lamke of the Constantines and You've Changed Records, Aaron and Phil, my friend Corey, and then Aaron and Phil asked their friends at the time, now my friends, Steve Clarkson and Arthur McInnes, to go. And from what I'm just doing the math on my fingers here, Judd, and me. So that's 8 people. At the time, 8-passenger vans were not readily available. So
Mhm.
we rented a 7-passenger van. By the way, as I tell this story, I should take a moment to apologize to my friend at the time and my friend still, Dallas Worley, also subsequently of the Constantines, who I maintain didn't really tell me if he really wanted to go. He claims he for sure said he wanted to attend the show, but I didn't get a positive yes, so I did not get him a ticket. Let me just say on the record, I listen to people. I ask people questions. I say, Dallas, you want to go? He's like, well, no, maybe. I don't know. I'm like, okay, sorry. I didn't mean to do a negative impression of Dallas on top of pouring more salt in
My
this.
favorite bass players of all time. So you tread
Yes.
lightly here, Mr. Vish.
So what happens is we get a 7-passenger van with 8 people. So we're all we realize it as we're picking everyone up that there's not enough seatbelts to cross the border legally. And so we're starting to panic. So we get to the border, and it's this like our border person was a woman from Detroit, and I still have a vivid memory of her saying, well, and I'll try to do an impression as tastefully as I can. And she was like, what's your business in Chicago? He's like, oh, we're going to see a band. What band is it? Well, it's a band called Fugazi. Fugazi? Is that some kind of heavy metal? Which we just thought, we were all like, what the hell? And to Steve's credit, his response was, well, it's not really heavy metal. It's kind of considered post-punk. He's trying to give her a genre lesson about like post-punk. Like we were like, what the hell? We get through. We cross the border. We go to Chicago, and we got to see Blonde Redhead, Shellac, and Fugazi. It was my second time seeing Fugazi, but my first time seeing Shellac, who I liked a lot. The show, if I turn around again, what the poster says is Fugazi and Shellac, and then it's got the J. Ryan creatures, which he described on your show. And beneath that, it says Independent Rock Music Label Festival, Friday,
Yes.
May 8th, 1998, Congress Theater, Chicago. So it was like a little fair, like a flea market, like fanzine fair thing. So you walk in the venue, and the lobby, as I recall, it was not a real like, it was kind of there were a lot of twists and turns in the lobby. It wasn't like a open space, but you could go and check out like Punk Planet. I bet had a table. The magazine had the zine at the time had a table, and all sorts of local organizations had tables. And there was Jay Ryan selling these prints. And so I bought one as soon as I could. I decided I wanted one of these, and I don't know what it was. It was probably 10 or 20 bucks American at the time. Aaron Riches knew Fugazi. He had set up their like second or third ever Canadian show in Guelph, Ontario in I want to say 1989. So he did that by writing them a letter. He liked Minor Threat, and he wrote Ian MacKaye a letter. And Ian said, well, we're not touring up there at the moment, but the next time we have no plans to, but the next time we'll definitely play Guelph. And sure enough, they did. So they get word to each other. Aaron gets word to Ian that he's there, and then Ian invites all of us to the Detroit show. They're playing the next night at the State Theater, and that's the first time I ever meet Ian MacKaye. We get there early enough. We're led into the building, like the side door, and we walk in, and Ian MacKaye goes, "Hey, you guys the Canadians?" And we said, "Yeah, I think so." Oh, great. Come on in. Yeah, you're friends with Aaron? Yeah. So we were talking to Ian. He's like, and because of the nature of the relationship, we got like backstage all access passes. So I took 1 billion photographs on stage of Fugazi and Shellac and Blonde Redhead. And so this is just an amazingly formative experience. And I loved it. But I had this Jay Ryan poster. I didn't know who Jay Ryan was. I was in university living in kind of squalid housing with like other dudes mostly. And, when I look back on it now, and it's amazing that women wanted to date you when you lived with 5 or 6 other guys, because that is a filthy, filthy dwelling.
This poster basically features a bunch of dogs, and one of the dogs has a pretty predominant butthole illustrated in it. So you were trying to find a suitable mate living with all these kind of dudes and in your gross house with a picture of a dog's butthole on your wall.
Well, oddly enough, the mate I did end up choosing if you will, or who chose me, really. Let's not kid. What right do I have to choose? She chose me. But anyway, yeah, so we ended up dating. And yeah, now that you mention it, it was that particular house that I had this poster up because it was relatively new to my life. Anyway, as a university student who doesn't, you get your little posters and you put masking tape on them and they fall off and then you move and they get all bent as shit and you're like, this beautiful poster is getting all fucked up. What I decide to do, someone's like, you could sort of plaque mount that thing. I say, what does that mean? They're like, when you get a nice piece of art, you can frame it beautifully,
Yes.
or you could do something called plaque mounting, which is basically freezing the artwork onto a piece of hard synthetic wood, I guess is maybe the best description for it. And it's just frozen for all eternity. They tell you, you could throw a glass of grape juice at it and just wipe it off. It'll survive most things. It's different than a frame. You're kind of basically what you're doing is you're killing it. You're killing the living piece of art and you're freezing it like Han Solo in that Star Wars movie. Right.
Yeah.
So he's alive, but he's dead
Yeah.
at the same time. So I plaque mount this gorgeous Jay Ryan poster, and then it to me seems safe. When I move, it's solid. Nothing's going to happen to it. Cut to the year, so this is 1998. Cut to 8 years later, 2006. I go to the, I think that's right. I believe that's correct. I go to the Touch and Go, I want to say 25th anniversary festival that happens in Chicago. And so this is a big deal. Touch and Go is 25 years old. Amazing record label, home to Shellac and a whole bunch of other great bands. And what do I see? A beautiful, giant piece of artwork being sold. And I see by the advertising or whatever, I figure out that it's a Jay Ryan. So I have this beautiful, gigantic Touch and Go anniversary poster that Jay Ryan made. There were two versions of it. I bought one of them. And I tell him, hey, I bought the Fugazi Shellac poster that you made at the Congress Theater show, remember? And he went, oh, wow, that's amazing. Like, there weren't that many of those. You have that? I'm like, yeah, I have it. I actually, I have it on my wall. I actually placarded it. I plaque mounted it. And he just looked at me and went, oh, well, you ruined it. And I felt very small. I was like, I did? He's like, well, yeah, you ruined it. And I was like, oh, shit. Because Jay Ryan said, you ruined it, I have cumulatively probably spent $7,000 on framing.
Frames.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you'll never plaque mount anything again.
That's right. He made that one little comment. So if something is significant to me, I have it framed. And if something is kind of pop arty or mass produced, I'm not totally against the plaque mounting. I still think it's better than taping something.
Yes.
I still think it has its place, but with something that's a limited run or a cool piece of art, yeah, I will shell out for it now that I'm an adult and have a little more money. But I also will make the argument that, sometimes punks don't have money. That's just the way punks are. And then you get to be a little less punk and you have a job and a mortgage.
The plaquing it obviously did protect it because that print is now coming up on 25 years old and you still have it. Whereas if you were just taping it and thumbtacking it to your walls over the years, I'm assuming it would not have made it this far and probably would be gone. So in some ways, the plaquing did a good thing.
I think so. And I was good with the taping. I did the loops behind the prints. Like I did the masking tape loops or whatever, which I thought was better than, scotch taping it across the corners. I was doing a good job of it, but I also, I agree with you. I regret it on the one hand, but I also have now moved that poster across the country and it looks good. And the memory of it, it's right behind me as I'm speaking to you, Judd. When I'm having sort of video calls, it's right behind me. And if I can see myself, I see it behind me and it fills me with a certain warmth and joy. And it made me feel good. I love Jay's work. My wife loves Jay's work. If you talk to Jay, he can tell you I've ordered a lot of his stuff awesome. Over the last few years. And it all stems from that early, really too, getting that first print and being at that show is really meaningful to me. His comment at the Touch and Go Festival obviously stuck with me. I didn't know I was ruining the work. It just never occurred to me. I just thought that was because it's cheaper than placketing. This, if you placket a thing, it's like it used to be anyway, $30. And if you frame that same thing, it could be $300 or $400.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's economics, and I don't feel that badly about it, but it was a learning. I learned something from Jay, and I do respect his work. So yeah, I'm waiting for the framing company here in Edmonton to get back to me, because I've just had several Jay prints framed properly, and they're on their way at some point. Yeah,
I love that this print gives you the warm and fuzzies and makes you feel good. When I see that you have one of these prints, it makes me feel very jealous. It makes me feel like I see it and I'm immediately like, how do I weasel this thing out of Vish's possession? It's good that you're very far away.
But let me say this, though. Does the fact that I placketed it, or whatever the plaque mounted it, does that diminish it for you as someone who knows about such things?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact of like, I looked online. I went on eBay just to be like, okay, so if you plaque mounted one of Jay Ryan's prints, what does that do to the value? It turns out, I think you might be the only one. I haven't found any other prints, any other Jay Ryan prints for sale anywhere that have been plaque mounted. So you might be the one rare elephant who went and took a print and got it plaque mounted. My response to you was kind of like, holy crap, that's incredible that you have that print. And then you wrote back and were like, oh, but I plaque mounted it. I don't know if that makes any difference to you. And it's funny because your response when I was like, what did you do? Was, well, I love the print. I will never sell it. I'm going to have it forever.
Yes.
And in that respect, it's like, yeah, who cares about the value? Who cares about any of it then if you're going to keep it for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
And I'm the same way. If I got my hands on one of these, of course, I would love it to be a pristine mint original that somehow managed to survive 25 years without ever getting a dent or anything.
Yeah.
But if it was plaque mounted, I also would not care because I'm like you, I would have it until the day I died. So the fact that you have one just fills me with rage and jealousy on your birthday.
I guess the one thing I missed in that story, because I fast forwarded from 98 to 2006, is that there was a very similar event in Chicago in 2001, and it was Fugazi, Shellac, and the X. And they did, I believe they did 2 nights in, I want to say June 2000. I can tell you, 1 second.
June 23rd and June 24th.
That's correct. Oh, okay. You know already. Look at you.
I'm staring at that poster right now. I've got it up on my screen.
Is that the one I texted you?
It is.
Yeah, I texted you photos of them. So that's it. And that is, in some ways, a more eye-catching and fascinating compositional poster. I love that poster. I love Jay's. I love the one that you covet. But if you look at that, it's pretty interesting, isn't it, what Jay did with that one?
It is really cool, and I love the fact I'm going to post both of these in the show notes for this episode, by the way, for folks who are listening to us talk about images we're looking at and you don't get to look at them. If you pop over to artdesignmusic.com right now, go over to episodes and click on episode 11, you'll be able to see exactly what it is we're talking about. Yeah, it's really cool. I like the fact that he almost like cut off parts of the bike just randomly. Like they look like almost like they somehow got taped out and are missing or something.
Yeah. So I went to that show as well, again at the Congress Theater. Anyway, yeah, I have 2 Jay Ryan Fugazi Shellac posters is really the interjection I wanted to make there. And anyway, that's the last time I saw them. So very sentimental. These posters are beautiful, and Jay's a genius, so that all works out well. Yes. But the shows themselves are so important to me in my makeup, foundationally, that's so important to me that I got to see those 2 bands. I mean, I've seen Shellac like 10 times. I saw Fugazi 7 times, 10 or 11 times now. I've seen Shellac a lot for someone who, their first Canadian show was in 1999 in Vancouver, and I was there.
Amazing.
So yeah, I feel very lucky. And then, yeah, when I look at those Jay Ryan prints, they're really like right now I'm still hanging stuff up in this office, but those are the 2 most prominent pieces I have hanging. And they just mean a lot to me, and I like having them in my workspace. They're inspiring.
That's awesome. Jay said that when I interviewed him about this, he said that he sold those posters for $5. Now, I know he said that just in passing, like it wasn't like specific. He was just talking about how he went to the show and sold some posters for $5. Now, you mentioned it was somewhere between $10 and $20 that you paid for the poster, which is great.
No. I was guessing. I'm guessing.
Okay, but he might have been guessing too. So let's go and say it was $20. It says right on that poster that those tickets were $6 each.
Yeah.
So if you take the price of the tickets, you bought 8 tickets, then that gets you at $48. Add say $20. We'll go with the maximum price for the poster. You're in $68, and you spent another $30 on that gorgeous plaque mounting job you had done at the mall. And so we're now up to $98. And so here we go. Right now, I will offer you double your money, $200 to buy your destroyed, ruined Fugazi poster, which you've said straight up here only 5 minutes ago, you don't even like as much as your other Fugazi shellac
Oh,
poster.
God. You're really catching me in my words here. Well, that's
are you going to sell it, or are you taking it to your grave?
That is a not so generous offer, Judd. Thank you. I'm going to say I'm going to have to decline.
I knew it.
I think the latter is true. I can't think of any earthly reason why I would part with any of my Jay Ryan prints.
I wouldn't either. I appreciate the fact that you appreciate those prints as much as I do. I love the fact that poster has been my absolute holy grail item I've been trying to find forever. And I love that you, just listening to the episode, sent me a text and we're like, I got that poster. And it is so cool. I love that someone I know has one. And someday I hope to come and visit you and see it in person.
I got to make sure you don't leave with it. The serendipity involved in all of it. I was messaging you listening to that episode to be like, what are the goddamn odds that Jay would pick that as his favorite poster? And then for you to say that that's one that you coveted. So
it's also my favorite one. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the odds of that? And for me to be like, what the hell? He's made 1,000 things. I have the one he decides that you're going to talk about. What?
Yeah. It's his favorite. It's my favorite. And it's kind of your second favorite, I guess.
I love them both.
Yes.
I just thought compositionally, the bike one has always just struck me as a beautiful piece of, whether it said Fugazi and shellac and everything below, I just think it's a really beautiful piece of art. And I was just happy. I was just so happy listening to you and Jay have that conversation on multiple levels. I love you both. I love your work. I love you as people. And there were just so many moments for me to be like, wow, this is great. Let's face it, Judd, you guys made that episode specifically for me. That's what I'm getting at. And I really appreciate the solid. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And again, happy birthday. You are amazing, and I love you.
I love you too, Judd. Thank you so much. That was longer. That's like a whole other episode. Are you just going to post the whole thing?
No, I'll probably cut it down to 2 minutes. So, well, that was fun. I loved prodding him about that poster. I knew there wasn't a chance in hell I was ever going to get it out of him, but I had to try. I may never encounter another one. So the episode of Vish's podcast, Creative Control, featuring me, will be coming out sometime in the next week, apparently. So check that out if you can. In the meantime, I'm still on the hunt for that Jay Ryan print. If you know someone who's got one, hook me up. Please. All right, contest time. All season, I've been hyping up the fact that we're giving away a little something with each episode. The prizes have been as varied as the guests, and I'm excited to finally be able to announce who our winners are. We had just under 1,000 entries when you combine folks who wrote in with comments or show suggestions, folks following our social media. Some people were entered multiple times if they were following our Facebook and Instagram pages at Art Design Music Podcast and also took a moment to write in. I was very excited to see there was a nice mix of winners across email entries, Facebook, and Instagram followers. We chose the winners by logging all the 1,000 names into random.org and then doing 10 random draws in order and just pulling them that way. Seemed to be the most unbiased way to do it. Hope you agree. If not, not much we can do about it. Remember on our first episode, we spoke with Say Adams, the graphic designer and art director responsible for creating many of the most important hip-hop albums and brands on the planet? It took some digging, but I managed to track down a copy of his long out-of-print book, Definition, The Art and Design of Hip-Hop, at a library sale in Farmingdale, New York. I'm happy to report that the book is going back down south of the border to Joanna Seaborn from Nashville. Joanna is a designer and illustrator who creates extremely beautiful and fun work. We've never met, but I did creep out her portfolio after her name was drawn for this book. Joanna, I'm going to drop you a line on Instagram to get your address so we can get this book to you right away. Chad Van Galen, our episode 2 guest, released his awesome new record, The World's Most Stressed Out Gardener, a few months ago, and I've got a copy on its way to Andrea Vincent in the Yukon. Andrea is the executive director of the Dawson City Music Festival, and we share the same birthday. Happy birthday to us! Well, in July, but happy birthday, Andrea. Jay Ryan's amazing print, Here Comes a Riff, is headed to Adrian in Ottawa. While according to the online stats, there have been folks listening to art design music in over 40 countries so far, around half of our listeners have been in Canada. So it's not surprising to me that around half of our winners were also in Canada. I'm so happy to see this gorgeous print headed to our nation's capital. Keep an eye on your mailbox, Adrian. It's on the way. So many people commented on Jeanette Beckman's episode. Remember, she was the photographer who lived with an LA street gang for a summer and started her career taking photos of Sting, The Clash, and Salt and Peppa? You all seem to have really loved her stories, and I get the vibe that many of you are hoping to come back as Jeanette in another life. She sent along one of her super fun photography chapbooks, which will be going to Luke Vast. I'm not really sure where Luke lives. I kind of think Vancouver, but I'm not totally sure. I'll figure it out. Luke follows our Instagram at Art Design Music Podcast, and he won the book there. Gerard Huerta's episode has been the most played one of the season and continues to be picking up steam every day. I was pretty pumped to find a reprint of the Japanese version of the Friday the 13th poster Gerard worked on. That poster is on its way to Nazul Cab, an awesome young illustrator living in Mexico. Check out his work at Nazul_Cab. That's NAZUL_CAB. And another podcast won the AC/DC Deluxe Edition, which is super fun. The Atlanta, Georgia-based podcast Rock Girls Talk is hosted by Holly Ratchet and Calamity Jane, which I'm going to assume is not their real names, but that's cool. That's cool. It's exciting to see that even other podcasts are listening to our podcast. So awesome. Keep an eye on your mailbox, girls. Michelle Holme designed AC/DC Deluxe Edition is on its way. Aaron Awad from Guelph, Ontario has won John Prine's Common Sense on vinyl. I creeped Aaron's website, and it looks like he's quite an accomplished designer, printmaker, and photographer. Just the kind of listener we're looking for. So thank you so much for checking out the podcast, Aaron, and enjoy your new Polishare designed John Prine record. Zach Atkinson is a graphic designing record store / venue owner from Fredericton, New Brunswick. I kind of figured odds were good that at least one of these prizes would go to someone I'm friends with, since so many have been supportive of this project. So let me say hi and talk directly to Zach for a moment. Everyone else, plug your ears. Hey, old buddy, you won the draw for the Hayden Menzies t-shirt. I hope you and Roxana and the kids are doing great. I hope the cap is doing great. And I hope to get to see you all soon. It's been way too damn long. I ordered 2 copies of Drew Millward's colorful and fun Hoppy Pop screen print. One is framed on my wall in my living room, and the other is going to Ben Nelson in Kingston, Ontario. Ben is a killer designer, visual artist, and musician, as I mentioned earlier. And do you remember that incredible punk band P.S. I Love You? Ben was one half of that dynamic duo. I'm a big fan of his art and music, so I'm very happy that this screen print is headed his way. And the last prize is the Blue Rodeo double LP of 5 Days in July that Aaron Draplin was coveting so hard in episode 10. I found a copy of this at my local record shop, Fred's Records, and I picked up a second copy to give to one of you. Normally, I'd be more than a little afraid of things looking biased in this contest, and I was very worried when I pulled Amanda and Tim's name from the random.org hat. Tim is a member of Loel's band Winter Sleep that I talk about at the end of every episode. So he and I also used to be bandmates, and we're still great buddies to this day, even though I usually only get to see him every couple of years. But anyway, they won. The draw came up with their names, so this Blue Rodeo record is going off to them. End of story. Not biased. That's it. Too bad. And to be honest, I almost can't think of a better person to send this to. Many, many years ago, Winter Sleep finished a tour that ended in Ontario, and we had to get our van and all our gear back out east. Tim and I offered to drive, and on that marathon trip, we found ourselves driving through Quebec in the middle of the night with the windows down, both of us just wailing away, singing along to Blue Rodeo's greatest hits album. It was such a fun trip, and I don't think I could have had a better Blue Rodeo sing-along buddy. So he deserves this record as much as anyone. It's kind of serendipitous that they won, actually. Tim, I'll pop that in the mail to you and Amanda in Regina right away. So that concludes contest winners for this season. I'm going to add an art design music beanie, plus some stickers or pins with each prize. So winners, keep an eye out. Lots of fun stuff coming your way. We'll have more giveaways to coincide with season 2 episodes. So if getting things for free is your cup of tea, then please do subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or Google Podcasts, just so you know when those episodes debut. Do it. Who's ready for another guest? All the beats used throughout this first season of Art Design Music have been played and recorded by one of my best buds, Loel Campbell. We've collaborated on more than our fair share of projects over the years, and having him work with me on this podcast has been an absolute dream. I really wanted to have a chat with him on the show, and now seems like a great time. We find him at a Toronto studio where he has been secretly rehearsing with an iconic Canadian band.
I'm good, man. Yeah, I just went and grabbed a coffee, and I'm just awaiting the arrival of everybody here. But yeah, not for a couple hours, I don't think, before I have to do stuff.
So remind me real quick now, how do you remember that we met?
Could have been like through an email or something.
That's the way I remember, yeah.
Yeah, but I think we were both in the same rehearsal space at the time, but maybe didn't formally get introduced or something. But I think there was maybe initially, I don't know if we were talking about Dependent before we formally met, or I can't remember, but or Burnt Black for that matter. Or
yeah. That's the only reason I ask, because my memory sometimes plays tricks on me, and I'll remember something a certain way, and one little detail might be wrong or something, and so I know I can't 100% always trust every memory in my brain.
Yeah.
The way that I remember we met was, you were running Burnt Black's website.
Yes.
And for folks listening who don't know who Burnt Black is, they're a Nova Scotia band from many years ago that Loel and I both were massive fans of long before we met each other. And so I think you were running Burnt Black's website, and I had just wrote the website or wrote you. That's the way that I remember us meeting, but then we didn't meet face to face for quite a while after that.
Yeah, I think I was probably in high school still
when I wrote you. Yeah, but I wouldn't have known that at the time. So
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, yeah, I think we met shortly after started hanging out and stuff.
I remember you doing some work on Carrie's Sound of Beauty Breathing, which was, of course, Paul and Tim's band long before Winter Sleep even existed. And you were doing some design work helping that record come together. And you guys contacted me to help you pull it together, just basically to get it into the proper templates and get the barcode on it and all that kind of stuff so it could actually go to print. Yeah,
that's right. Because I was in touch with those guys a lot. I think they knew I had Photoshop or something like that. And Carrie was spelled in kind of a Times New Roman, kind of just basic font. And that stayed for the album. But I think my brilliant idea was because on the photo of that cover was shot of like the peaks of some buildings in a
Yeah,
row.
and some clouds in the background.
Exactly. So my idea was take the sky and use it as like a texture within the face of the font, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, this would have been 2000 or 2001. I think it was 2000. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, that would have been coming out of the 90s when so much Photoshop was used that way.
Yeah, not a super creative, not a I don't know, just working within whatever parameters. Yeah, I don't know. At the time, I just like, oh, that'll be cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was trying to remember, and I was thinking, I was pretty sure that the first time that we actually met each other face to face and sat in the same room and hung out was sitting down putting that record together.
mm,
And so anyway, not to be super nerdy, but it just made me like pretty excited to think about the fact that that our first kind of hangout was surrounded by essentially graphic design for a music project.
yeah, I remember. Yeah, like I think that, and then that threaded into you getting involved with Dependent more and taking the Dependent music website to another level.
And Dependent music, for anybody listening, Brian Borchard, who was the singer and guitar player in Burnt Black, he started in high school his own kind of little record label music collective called Dependent Music. And Loel was involved in that as well. And then when I started hanging out with Loel and by proxy started hanging out with Brian, I ended up also getting involved in Dependent music. And for a number of years, I feel like it was 6, 7, maybe even 8 years, that kind of dominated all of our lives between our own bands and running Dependent and kind of seeing that grow. That was a very fun, exciting way to spend for me, it would be my mid to late 20s. And for you, it would be like your late teens, early 20s. It was kind of a really fun ride. We put out probably about 25 records, mostly our own bands, but also some of our friends' bands. You mentioned a minute ago that we both were in the same jam space, and I remember this part very clearly. My band that you mentioned the name a second ago, Bucket Truck, we were in one room, and your band, Contrived, and also Tim and Paul's band, Carrie, were in the room directly next to us. There was no soundproofing in these walls, no nothing. And so we could hear each other back and forth very loudly. And I remember sitting in our jam room day after day, listening to your bands through the walls and always really loving these bands. This was before I was working with you with Dependent and like had anything to do with any of these bands, but always being really, really pumped by what Contrived and Carrie were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember like when you linked up with us when we were kind of had the initial threads of Winter Sleep starting. Like I think we still did stuff in my apartment though. Like we didn't work there all the time, did we?
When you first contacted me about coming and playing with Winter Sleep, you guys had been working on that project for many months already, and you all had even already demoed a bunch of songs.
Yeah.
And a lot of those songs ended up, not the same recordings, but those particular songs ended up on the first record the band put out.
That's right.
And so I remember when I came along, you guys had you guys already had a vision for what this band was going to sound like. And you had some really, really great songs. So I remember just going by one day and picking up just a burned CD of this demo. And for me, I had like just left that Bucket Truck band. Really didn't want to be in a band. I was kind of just jaded by many years of playing and touring and having it not really do what, in your head you wanted it to do. And so I kind of was like, really had no interest in being in a band because you guys weren't looking for a bass player. I remember you were only looking for like someone to play bass for a couple shows you had booked. You weren't necessarily asking me to be in the band. So I was like, sure, I'll play these couple shows. And I remember picking up the CD, popping it in the CD player in my car. And before I even made it home, immediately, like, I was like, oh my God, like, I need to be in this band. Like, I don't want to be the temp guy who plays for a couple shows. I was like, these demos are amazing. I love it. I want to do this. And I remember our first jam, and we were jamming in your bedroom, essentially. First jam with any new band is always a day that's going to live with you. And you had a Hayden Skyscraper National Park poster up on the wall.
Yeah.
And I remember I loved that record so much. Still do. Yeah, I remember sitting down with my bass and we're all chatting and learning and playing songs and looking up and seeing that poster on the wall and just being like, yeah, these are good people. They're coming from the same place as me. I can see this is going to be good. I can see that we really got something fun. But that poster has always stuck with me.
Was it the one with the bear on it or the moose?
Yeah. There was one with the bear.
Yeah. I love the aesthetic of that whole album. It was so cool. That's exactly it. Interesting to think back about that stuff. I think all of our tastes were kind of like shifting together too. Like, I think we all became interested in the band Low at this around the same time, and yeah, that Skyscraper album was new then, and we were all very into that. We're kind of looking to explore these kind of like sparser kind of arrangements and different way of songwriting for all of us.
Yeah, and I'd never heard of Low in honesty until I'd met you guys. That wasn't a band that was on my radar. But now, they've been for the last 20 years one of my favorites, to the point that I've flown away to see them play live and everything. Because they've never come to St. John's, Newfoundland. But so I remember you always keeping track of how many. Like you had a document where you were always keeping track of all the Winter Sleep shows.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any recollection of how many shows you're up to now?
I lost track. I tried to update it. I think I would have to search for that. There's a lot, especially up till like 2012 or so. Yeah, there was a couple years I think where we played I think we played over 200 shows, or something like that, which is bananas. But I should try to update that. And I think I sent that back and forth with we had some Mark Sloggett and a few other folks have kind of like documented a lot of our shows and kind of been kind of archivists of our history, we're very lucky if we're thinking about looking back. I think I kind of checked in with him and he kind of filled in a couple gaps. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. I mean, it's definitely well over. It must be around 1,500 shows or 2,000 or I don't know. Yeah, it would be. It's 20 years of 20 years of shows. So
yeah, and for anybody who's not aware, I haven't been there this whole time. I started with the band, and then I think 6 years in or 7 years in is when I stepped back and moved back to Newfoundland. But they've been continuing to go ever since. So now, yeah, they're rolling up on the 20th anniversary. You guys are, which is kind of amazing. Blows my mind. We've always been curious about how many shows, because I know I don't even know how many it was that I played with you, but I feel like it was probably at least 200 or 300.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we did that. We did a ton of shows, even in the States. When we did that Tragically Hip show, that was probably 15, 20 shows, even just in that one run.
Yeah,
probably 10 across Canada's, and went to Europe, etc. And
yeah,
a lot of legwork.
One thing I remember realizing when the band started to take off that was really fun was I would be standing on the stage playing bass, and I could see people with their cameras out, and they would be leaning around me, like trying to get around me, like get me out of the way so that they could take photos of you. And because you were very quickly gaining a name as like being a really great drummer. And I remember it was like pretty obvious, almost not too far into the band, that it was like, wow, like people are really, really engaged and latching on to Loel. And we started setting up the stage. I don't remember if it was a conscious decision or whether it just started happening, where we were kind of all staggered on stage. Like your drums weren't usually dead center. They were off a slightly bit to the side. And the five of us could set up in a way where essentially no one stood in front of you. And so if someone was standing in the dead center of the crowd watching the show, they would actually have perfect sight lines to be able to watch you, so they wouldn't have to lean around me anymore to try and get a view of Loel playing drums. I thought that was kind of a funny thing. I was like, I'd see people like trying to get a shot. I'm in the way. And I was like, Loel is becoming a bit of a star here. And but not surprising, like I say, because your drumming has always been pretty amazing. And it was always a huge treat for me getting to spend all those years building that little rhythm section with you. It was really fun. And look, those years for me still are some of the most fun I've ever had in my life. So thanks for inviting me into the band, even if I was only supposed to be there temporarily. And I had a blast.
The amount of time that we spent crafting those, bass and drum parts and stuff like that, getting everything just right, and kind of, it's very intricate stuff. I mean, I think it's, some of the most intricate stuff in the history of the band that we developed together, a lot of thought put into it, a lot of scrutiny, a lot of, and in retrospect, good decisions and choices that we made, because I'm still so proud of the music that we came up with.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, we would do, something that I don't know if every band does, I assume most don't, is we would have jams, you and me, just bass and drums working on songs.
Yes.
which I don't imagine most bands do, because in a lot of music, a just bass and drum jam is probably not the most interesting thing in the world to do, or how to spend your time.
Yeah.
And then we didn't do it a lot, but we would do it when we were working on new songs. We would do that just to kind of like work out fun little parts, which was always cool.
Yeah. We knew when we were I think we both would discuss that we need to work on this more and we can foster this, and yeah, we were driven.
Music industry and playing music is, I think, what set all my drive in motion. It was kind of like, it's a weird thing because almost any industry you get into, like if you go to school to become a doctor, at the end, you're a doctor. If you want to be a computer programmer and you go and you learn the computer programming languages, you can go get a job as a computer programmer. And music is a weird thing where it's like you can put in all the work. You can go out there and make the record, slog away on tour, do all the things that you're supposed to do. And it doesn't mean there's actually going to be a livable career at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I just think that the amount of drive and determination that you need is huge. And I don't think I would have mine if I hadn't spent all those years kind of like basically feeling like it's me and my like 4 buddies against the whole world right now. And we need to figure out how to win this battle. You mentioned a second ago, up until, say, 2012 was really intense with touring. Of course, we're talking about Winter Sleep. The last so many years, the band has kind of moved in and out of more relaxed touring schedules, kind of between records. When you put a new record out, you go on tour a lot, but then you take some time off. And during those times, you've had a chance to fill those spaces with going out and touring and playing with some other bands. Like I know you've played with Matt Mays off and on a bunch. You did a full year, I think, of playing with Cold Specs, which was kind of amazing because in that period of time, you got to play Massey Hall, which I was super jealous of because that's a venue that I have, always dreamt about playing since I was a kid.
I'm going there. I'm going to play there today, actually. Funny enough.
You're going to be playing Massey Hall today. So weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And for anybody listening, we did not plan that moment. I had no idea Loel was going to be stepping foot in Massey Hall today. So, yeah. Well, that's very cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's I've been fortunate to have people ask me, and I think there's been a lot of times where I've been asked to do things, and you're just like, you just kind of want to just stick to your own project, stay in your lane or whatever. And I don't know. At some point, I think it was just like, oh, I don't know. These are great opportunities, and I have the time to do them, and it's not really compromising anything else. So, I just really love the communication involved and all that. Seeing how the musical language is interpreted through these different projects, and I find it. I always learn a ton doing it, and I think and hopefully it makes me a better musician too.
Yeah, I mean, because every band are going to have different ways of doing everything, from being on stage to even just how they navigate being on the road and dealing with each other. And suddenly you're thrust in the middle of that. So yeah, it's kind of an exciting but also daunting experience, I would imagine. Some bands are going to be like a total party on the road, whereas other bands are going to be total business on the road. And you have to navigate that right out of the gate, figure out where you fall in line.
Exactly. But it's interesting to step into these other projects and see how everybody does, because you're right. Like, yeah, some things can be a bit like a party, or, like a bit kind of unhinged. And then, it's grown me to know that I really like a professional atmosphere and people that want to show up and do the best work possible, and have a respect for everyone involved. It's been a great learning experience. Yeah. So more of that.
And speaking of working, you're in Toronto right now because you're putting the finishing touches on your own record, correct?
Yes, I just finished mastering an album I've been working on. I think I started in like 2009, and so I think it's done now.
Amazing,
which is kind of crazy because that's 12 years out. So I mean, obviously, lots to go. I need to talk to you about artwork and and just figuring out where it fits into the scheme of things. But yeah, no, it's very excited. I'm proud of it, and
I'm so excited to hear it. So 2022 will be a release date at some point in this next year, I imagine.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I just want to figure out. Like, I would like to make some vinyl and stuff like that. So that's so backed up at the moment that realistically it probably won't be till next fall at this point. But yeah, it's cool. I've got some friends on it and stuff like that. I didn't get you on this one, but I guess it's time to start the next one. So
Yeah, well, I live pretty damn far away, so I totally get it.
yeah.
Well,
I mean, COVID though. I mean, everything's remote. That like. Were you you did that track for Burning Hell recently, and it sounds great. It's got such your voice on it, like the bass that you did on that Burning Hell song that you shared with me.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and that record's not coming out until the spring, I don't think. So unfortunately, I won't be able to share that one in the show notes or anything for this episode with anybody else yet.
Yeah,
but
yeah, definitely do. It's fantastic.
The funny thing with that is it wasn't done remotely. Like the Burning Hell,
right?
The Burning Hell, who, for folks listening, is a band from they live in PEI right now. They've been a band for probably 15 years and have lived everywhere. But right now they're based in PEI and probably will be forever from now. But they were last winter, were living directly next door to me here in St. John's. And so they just brought recording equipment across the backyard and I recorded my bass part in my kitchen. So as it turns out, that was like not a remote recording at all. It was really nice. I actually did it here in the house.
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to thank you now for probably because you mentioned COVID, probably because of COVID, you've had all this extra time not on the road. And while that was also the period I've been producing this podcast, that meant that you were available to play a whole bunch of fun drum chops. And you've been kind of like playing all these drum beats. And we kind of carved out the idea to like, as opposed to getting a couple beats and using them repetitively through the entire thing, like a theme song or something, you and I had the idea of like, why don't we make basically different beats for every episode? And because you were set up and able to do that at the time. So I want to play a fun little game just for a second and just see, because you've recorded so many. I counted last night and you've recorded like 25 different drum beats for this season of the show. And so I just wanted to play one and see if you remember what the song is.
Okay. Oh, that's Run DMC. The
Tricky.
Dun, dun. Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. We used that one in episode 1, which had Say Adams, who was the graphic designer and kind of creative director who's worked with everybody from Beastie Boys and Run DMC to Notorious B.I.G. and P. Diddy and everybody else. So, do you remember this one? Yeah, so that one is Shoot by Salt and Pepper.
Oh yeah, right. It's funny how like identifiable that I think that like because I'm doing the acoustic drums, that was like on the shoot loop. That's like obviously a drum machine or something like that. Shoot loop. There we go. Yeah. Can you keep them coming?
Sure. Yeah. I got a couple more dialed up here. Yeah. Cause I've been really curious as to whether like folks, cause this is the first time that I've mentioned this. I wasn't sure if people at home have even picked up on the fact that the beats that are being used in the episode actually tie into the episode. Like for instance, on episode 4, Jeanette Beckman, who's the incredible photographer who worked with everybody from the kind of British punk scene into the New York hip hop scene, and then going into kind of more contemporary pop acts like Tracy Chapman and B-52s and everybody. There was this song.
That's Love Shack, I believe.
That cowbell brings it home. Yeah. There's a couple episodes where we talk about AC/DC.
Yeah.
And I remember you and I listening to AC/DC songs, and the character of AC/DC is the guitar and the vocals, obviously. And like, obviously the bass and the drums have their part, and are very distinctive to that band, but there's no real hooks created in the drums or the bass in AC/DC. So it was kind of funny when we were looking at, okay, what AC/DC song can we put into this that someone will hear in the background and maybe kind of mentally think AC/DC or get put into that space. And it was actually quite difficult to find.
Yeah.
But this one was a fun one. This was kind of more, you know, an early 80s, late 70s, early 80s.
Blondie. Yeah. Yeah, AC/DC. I mean, same beat is used over and over. It's definitely like a very defining element. You know, AC/DC. You think about it, you know what you're going to get. That beat. Yeah, I think we did one, right?
We did, and it is used. There's the beat for Back in Black.
Yeah, because that one is very identical. Obviously, following the guitar, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully people picked up on it, and maybe folks didn't, but now that we've had this conversation, maybe they'll pick up on it from now on.
Yeah, it's a cool thread throughout. So I was wondering if anybody picked up on it yet.
I originally had no intention of repeating any beats. I thought it would be really fun to go with brand new beats for every single episode. And I wanted to start every episode with that quick little like quote from the guest, and then have it jump right into one of your beats. And I found that not all the beats worked great as an intro.
Yeah.
Some of them were fantastic and some of them weren't, but it blew my mind how much this one just fit. And so as it turns out, every single episode starts with the same beat. And who knows if that'll continue into future seasons. Maybe there'll be a different beat start all season 2 or all season 3. But at the moment,
you got a theme song.
Yeah, at the moment, this kind of became the theme song.
It's Waiting Room.
Waiting Room by Fugazi. And I'm also part of me is also like, how cool is it that it's like that beat?
It's very cool.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm loving it. And I'm going to play it again. I love it so much. So let's circle back now. Again, when I first met you, you were probably only 17 or 18 years old. And you played in like the most crushing band in Atlantic Canada, a group called Contrived. You know, I remember going to see you guys play all the time. I would listen to you jamming through that wall in the rehearsal space. And I remember even one night seeing you play. I think I told you this story years ago, seeing you play at the Attic and just standing in the audience. And the sound guy came up and stood next to me. And he just like was watching the show with me for a moment. And when you guys finished the song, he leaned right into my ear and was like, when I see these guys, all I can think is that every other band should break up. And it's just like that comment has stuck with me for like the last 20 years because it was pretty true. Like your band Contrived was like the most intense, kind of heavy, but like indie and just very like emotional, and just it brought out everything that, you know, a bunch of young people were feeling and needed in that time. And what is so cool is here we are 20 years later, and tell me about what's happening with you and the boys this week.
Yeah, we are. We're playing a show. We're playing 3 shows actually. We're getting together at the Seahorse Tavern in Halifax, which is below the Marquee. We did a kind of, I don't know. It's hard to call it a reunion because we never broke up, but we did a Contrived show a couple of years ago, and it was just so fun. And like, you know, we had a packed house, and you know, it was just felt great. So like, why don't we try this again? And so the first one's on December 16th, Thursday in Halifax, and then we go to PEI and play with Club Rat there at Sportsman's, which is like a kind of a dive, which will be really back to the good old days, because that was pretty much our exclusive haunts back then. And then we play in myself and Mike McNeil and Mike Bigelow's, like essentially our hometown of Stellarton, New Glasgow, at a new venue that's open there called the Commune, which sold out really quickly. So yeah, it seems like people are really excited to see us. Over the years, we kind of we have a lot of like unfinished ideas. I'm sure you've even heard a few of them. And we kind of didn't stop. Like whenever we were all around, we would always kind of work on something. So we've kind of have an accumulation of material and lots of new ideas too. So we're going into a studio on Monday, I believe, and we're going to try to sculpt some new things and you know, thread a new Contrived record together. So that, which is you know, I think the last one came out in 2008. So
wow,
yeah, it's really exciting. It's feeling really like the right time for it. We'll see what happens. Obviously,
that's awesome. This isn't like a nostalgic reunion show where you go out and just play the tunes from 20 years ago. This is basically picking up where the band left off and diving in with some. And I love the fact, like you say, you're playing kind of like the dive bar. I noticed the times are late night. Like this isn't nice early, like 7, 8 p.m. theater shows. This is going back to the 11, 12, 1 a.m. rock and roll in the dive bar. I love it. It's amazing. I really, really wish I could get over there and get to one of these shows. But it sounds like if there's going to be potentially a new record, that hopefully that means there'll be more shows, which means that maybe later in the year, maybe I can get over there and come see one of these shows. I'm really excited. I am totally smiling away here because the idea of more contrived in my world and everyone else's world is pretty cool. And I love that this was your high school band.
Yeah.
Very, very exciting and fun. And thanks so much for doing all these beats for the season. It was really fun. I really had no idea what kind of music to put in this podcast because we're going to be covering so many different genres. And then chatting with you and having the idea for the beats and just seeing it come together, and it actually worked so well. I'm super also loving the fact that we got to collaborate again on something after all these years. Mm-hmm. You've always been one of my favorite people. You're one of my best buddies. I love you, love you, love you.
Love you too.
And it's like, in all these years, it's just so great to be able to do something creative with you again. And I know your life is going to get super busy again one of these days.
Yeah.
And so I might not always have you around. But if you are around for season 2, that would be amazing. Season 3, season 4, season 5, whatever. And I will not be offended if you get too busy and when touring kicks back in full force. But I really hope you'll be around for the whole run. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love doing it. So, yeah, it's my pleasure. So I'll find the time. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Loel.
You're quite welcome.
What a sweetie. I had intended to mention some other groups Loel has played with over the years, but he threw me off when he said he was playing Massey Hall tonight. What a lucky little bastard. As I've mentioned, his main band when I met him was Contrived, and I played in Winter Sleep with him for a number of years, but that band has continued on to this day. He has also enjoyed an exciting career as a session collaborator, either as a producer or on drums, for groups like Land to Talk, Holy Fuck, Big Brave, Hannah George's, July Talk, and a ton of others. A couple years back, I drew a comic book style screen print for Hayden. Remember the musician who Loel had a poster on his bedroom wall 20 years ago when we had our first Winter Sleep Jam? In one of the frames of the new poster I drew for Hayden, I included a little rendition of that poster in the background. My image showed a man playing guitar with that original 20-year-old Hayden poster looking on in the background, the one with the bear. Every time I look at the Hayden poster that I created, it reminds me of those early Winter Sleep days. And while I didn't know him back then, Hayden and I have become friends in the years since. I create posters for a huge event he and his wife organize every year in Toronto. He has stayed at our place in St. John's, and I continue to be a massive, massive fan of his music. Now, I know I've thanked Loel 100 times during these episodes, but here's one more for the pile. Thanks, bud. And while I'm giving thanks to folks that have helped with the show, here's a couple more. I want to thank Kayla and Alan Johnson, as well as Jamie March, for the constant encouragement, cheerleading, and push to keep going when it seemed like I was never going to get this thing done. I want to thank my mother for having to listen to me talk about my ideas for this thing relentlessly for the past year. My amazing lady, Krista Power, for not only supporting this project, but also picking up the pieces of our lives when my obsessive ways had me buried in recording and editing. Vish for his early day advice on how a newbie makes a podcast in the first place. My friend Matthias for lending me some of his recording gear so I could figure out what I'm going to need in order to make this show sound better in the future. And of course, all of you for listening. Special bonus points to those folks who took a moment to pick up some merch off our website. It's been really fun sending Art Design Music shirts, beanies, stickers, and pins off to you. Huge special thanks to those very, very kind individuals who donated some cash-ish to help with production costs, hosting, and new gear. You folks are incredibly amazing, and thank you, thank you, Thank you. Oh, thank you. I am happy to report that money collected so far has been used to buy a fancy new studio preamp, which was used for the first time on this episode. And I want to send out a special thanks to Lori White, who made a more than generous donation and essentially made it possible to grab that preamp. I have been recording these shows using a microphone Krista and I had around the house for years and no other equipment other than a laptop. I know it can sound a hell of a lot better, and that preamp purchase is the first very important step to doing so. Next purchase will be a higher end microphone, which I am hell-bent on getting before starting season 2 recordings. Anyway, not to beat this dead horse, but if you haven't checked out our shirts and gear yet, pop over to artdesignmusic.com and click the merch button. I'm still blown away to have this first season under our belts. Oh man, lol, we did it. Guests are currently being locked in for a second season, and it's shaping up to be really exciting. Not going to give away anything here yet, but I am very excited by some of the guests that have agreed to come on already, and I can't wait to pick the brains of these evil geniuses. There's no release date set in stone for season 2 as of yet, but production is going to start immediately, and those episodes will be out as soon as possible. Please take a moment to hit subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. And the best way to make sure you don't miss us when we come racing back out with new episodes is to be subscribed. I'd also love to encourage you to drop us a quick podcast review and rate the show if you can. These things are free, only take a moment, and have incredibly huge impacts on helping spread the word about the show to new listeners. Loel and I are always looking to hear your thoughts on the podcast, any show suggestions you might have, and stories about your favorite album covers, band posters, tour shirts, etc. We love hearing from you, so drop us a line, find us on Facebook and Instagram at Art Design Music Podcast, and if you prefer old school email like we do, then send us a note at artdesignmusicpodcast@gmail.com. You can find Loel on Instagram at Loel Campbell and me at Mighty Pops. That's MIGHTYPOPS. If you're curious to learn more about my designer art, I have a portfolio website at judhaynes.com. That's JUDHAYNES.com. And as I've mentioned a million times, the website for the podcast is artdesignmusic.com. So this brings us to the end of today's show. Sorry, I know this one was a long one. As you may remember from my conversation with Aaron Draplin, my dad died a couple years ago. The last time I got to hang out with him, I dropped into my parents' place for a visit and talked his ear off about my ideas for this podcast. Ideas I had been obsessing about for months. He had no idea what a podcast was and only wanted to know if it would make any money. I told him, no, probably not. It probably wasn't going to. And he immediately told me I shouldn't waste my time on it under no uncertain terms. He never minced words, and I knew he'd be a hard one to convince. Now, I didn't need his permission. I could go ahead and do this if I wanted to. I'd done lots of things in my life that I'm sure he didn't fully approve of, but he's my dad, and of course I'd want him to support the things that I choose to do. I spent a solid hour or more blasting him with every idea I had for the show. We're talking potential guests I wanted to talk to, the idea to use drums instead of traditional music, and why this whole thing was important to me and why I thought it would be a positive experience, even if it would never likely generate a cent. He was used to me coming up with silly ideas and has listened to me rant on about them over and over for years. I had a zine for a spell. I've been involved in 2 indie record labels. I've played and/or toured in half a dozen bands, co-owned and ran a concert promotions company, have a skateboard company, a screen print studio, and even spent a couple years planning a massive documentary film on the Canadian music industry, a film that, of course, never happened. He was very used to me spouting off my big dreams, knowing that, with the exception of that film, I usually figured out some way to make them happen. And after I'd spent that afternoon selling all my points about the podcast, the hardest elevator pitch of my life, he just smiled and said, well, sounds like you can't go wrong with this one. That was all the blessing I needed. If my dad, the biggest skeptic of skeptics, could be sold on the idea, then this podcast might just be worth chasing after all. He was gone suddenly a few days later. My mom has had to pick up the slack and become the listener of my epic life idea rants. Whereas she used to run and find something productive to do, making Dad be the one to have to sit and listen to me go, she has been incredibly patient in his absence. She and my best gal Krista, who has also had to endure hours of me trying to figure this art design music thing out. So I want to dedicate this entire season to them. And of course, to my dad. He would never have actually listened to all these episodes. He didn't have the patience for that. He loved music, but could give a shit about art and design. But it makes me so happy knowing that he felt that, quote, I can't go wrong with this one. Well, he said it. I don't know if he actually felt it, but he said it. And that's good enough for me. So this concludes season 1. Lots more art design music to come. Bye!